Okie dokie. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, while you guys are all filing in, I just wanted to let you know about a couple things we have going on here. Oh, by the way, my name is Casey. I'm a bookseller at Green Apple Books on the Park. And thanks for joining us here virtually. Thanks for waiting a couple minutes. So we have a few upcoming events planned that I wanted to let you guys know about. We have later this week, we kind of have a series of science fiction centric events with a really great lineup. Thursday, we'll be hosting Martha Wells for the latest book in her Murderbot series, Fugitive Telemetry, and she will be joined by Annalie Newitz. On Friday, Sugi Davies Okunbawa will join us to discuss the first book in a new epic fantasy trilogy called Son of the Storm with Rebecca Roanhorse. And Saturday, we are partnering with Litquake and 48 Hills to celebrate Charlie Jane Anders's YA sci-fi debut, Victory's Greater Than Death, and River Solomon's latest novel, Sorrowland. So for that last one, registration is required. So be sure to find the link on our website for that one to sign up. And as always, Zoom links and registration links are always on our event calendar on our website. That's just at greenapplebooks.com/event. Also, a lot of recordings of past events, if you missed them, are available on our YouTube channel, which is just Green Apple Books on YouTube. So with all of that said, I wanted to introduce tonight's book and authors. We're excited to celebrate the release. Today is the release date of One Kind Favor. We are joined by the author, Kevin McIlvoy. Kevin is the author of 7 previous books, 5 novels, as well as a short story collection and a poetry collection. He is a retired Regents Professor of Creative Writing at New Mexico State University and now teaches at the Warren College MFA program in Creative Writing. His writing has appeared in Harper's, Southern Review, Plowshares, and other publications. And tonight, Kevin will be joined by Peter Orner. Peter is also the author of several books, most recently the short story collection Maggie Brown and Others, and he has edited 3 works of nonfiction oral history for Voice of Witness. Peter also teaches on the fiction faculty at the Warren College MFA program for writers, and his work has appeared in the New York Times, the Paris Review, the New Yorker, and other publications. And just as a reminder before I hand it off, if you want to purchase a copy of One Kind Favor, you can do so on our website, which is just greenapplebooks.com. You can just search the title and add it to your cart. And also, lastly, if you have any questions during the talk tonight, feel free to leave them throughout the event in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will address them at the end. So with all that said, I'll hand it off to Peter and Kevin. Thank you again so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Casey. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Mac.
Hi, everyone. I assume we're ready to start.
I think we are. I mean, it's
yeah. This is. I mean, my own.
A little weird. But
yeah.
There's a crowd, and here we are. And Mac,
yeah.
I think you're going to read from this glorious new book.
I am. I'm going to read a little bit. Is it all right for me to go ahead and start us off that way?
That'd be great.
All right. First, I want to say, Peter, thanks so much for doing this. This is a way of cheering for my work and cheering me on in my work, in my life as an artist. That matters. It matters a great deal. And it is wonderful for you to do this. I also want to say before I read how really grateful I am to Green Apple Books on the Park for doing this. This is a way for me to revisit a bookstore that I have come to know since I have a son living in the Bay Area and that I admire very much. I do want to remind everybody who just heard from Casey that you can buy my book, that you can buy Maggie Brown and Others and work by Peter there. I know he wouldn't say so, but it's there. I'm sure of it. And I hope you'll look it up. One last thing before I read. I just have to say thank you to Peg Alfred Purcell and WTAW Press. Peg is an unbelievably wonderful editor who has inhabited my work and given me new ways in the editing process to be inside my own work. She's done an amazing job of speaking from inside my work for my work to readers. And it has been an extraordinary experience. I'm so grateful to you, Peg, and I'm so happy about this day arriving, the launch day. So I'll read two chapters from late in the novel. These pages present the aftermath of a big event in the town of Cord called the Soldier's Joy Festival. At the festival, the character Acker has suicided. She is then returned on the same day as a presence. I don't think it gives away too much to say that from the beginning of the novel, she was a presence, a ghost not easily recognizable as a ghost. These pages also include Bunny and the Mr. Rouncival, the owners of the town's hotel. On Acker's orders, they hold a government agent named Alice captive there at the hotel. This is chapter 39, and I'll read this and a part of 40. The Soldiers' Joy Festival Board met at the consignment bar for the profits, problems, planning after report. Junior noted the record ticket sales profits and the Samaritan sponsorship percentages with the Robert Rules of Order permission of Pamela Hayes. He asked to speak about problems and planning as one item. All in favor, Pamela said and wrote approved before receiving unanimous assent. Junior said, 2 Islams came, walked away with bags of camo. Pamela asked, you're aware they're not called Islams? Did they pay for their items? Oh, they paid. Noted. There was the suicide incident, he said. We cannot have a repeat of that travesty, said Pamela, writing her own words into the board minutes. What happened? Happened, said Minister, who could not exactly say that he was sure the suicide had traumatized the festival goers. Hadn't they thought it was a performance? No, they definitely had not. Some probably had. Do we have a clear record of suicide complaints from festival goers? Asked Junior. He waited for Minister or another board member to answer. Pamela Hayes asked, am I supposed to have the answer to that? She wrote, following an ignorant comment and an ignorant question from Junior about the problems agenda item, discussion proceeded to planning for 2018. What had happened? The small town roared up from the gasoline thrown onto it by Acker's bloody self-sacrifice performance in a town square as square and fair as any ever portrayed in a tale of fear and horror in a sleepy southern Piedmont hollow. Roar, said the small town. Roar, said the small town crowd. Roar was the sound, the snarling sound of the small town crowd in the small town where bedsheet brown shirts felt sorely put down like they felt in all their small crybaby towns all around here. Roar, roar, said the white hot hate states and the hot white neighbor states, raging and roaring and rallying around a squeaking, slime-ringed, squirmy orange bath toy that the bawling, wailing crowd took for a grinchy savior. And after all the barking and teeth baring and slobber splashing, there was the roaring, the deafening roaring, and the crowd of look-alike insulligans whimpered in weltering rage that America no longer let it roar. People in town talked about the shooting as something that could have been worse if bullets had strayed. Accidental and fratricidal and domestic incident and suicidal deaths by gunfire were so commonplace in armed-to-the-teeth towns like Cord that it had become acceptable to have more gun-home deaths and naturally more mass school, mall, church, town square deaths occur not too long after the shooter was identified as a quiet, keeps-to-himself outsider, after the blood of the lamb or the wool of the wolf and lamb's wool was washed away, and after the cleanup of the site of the killing memorial flower pile and the usual pileup of emotionally indifferent, Twitter-muttered thoughts and prayers. The techno-savvy three young agents needed only a few hours to edit together their eye footage of the Acker incident. They sent the downloadable 3-minute final account to what they called SAFE, State Agency Forensic Experts. SAFE would share the information with ICE, the Homeland Gestapo, that liked the flypaper conditions of free to the public annual events in agricultural areas and in evangelical churches. This much was reported in the newspaper, and no one except Acker objected. Actually, she expressed a strong sense of injury to the plural of expert appearing in newsprint as expert ''s. She had responded with similar indignation when the newspaper published a photo on the front page with the simple, unelaborated caption, local ''s opine. The picture showed a spray-painted monkey image of Obama with giant monkey lips sucking his own giant monkey black dick. Obama's long coiled monkey tail, really quite beautiful, was a striking snake. On Inauguration Day of the Trump Reich, this dumpster art had been moved from behind the Perfection lumber store to a position of honor at the store entrance on the town square, so that visitors could appreciate the artwork of our finest young skinhead, Jesus-blooded white nationalists. Agents Ward, Shaw, and Melvin had given Bunny and the Mr. Runcival their notice that they would check out of the hotel in the morning, right after the festival ended. The Mr. asked if they would like to visit Agent Alice Bracco, but they could not think why, though they were staying on the same floor and 3 doors down. She's sitting up now, but she's weak, vulnerable, said Bunny. She's alone, not feeling all there. A visit from friends might lift her spirits. Constipated, said the mister, regretting that the word did not communicate his compassion for Alice's condition. He asked, you young men have something better to do? As the three took the stairs to their room, Bunny reproved the mister. Leave them be. She took the corners of his shirt collar into her fists, let go, and gave him the check hook punch that always put his upper body where she wanted it when she needed him off of her after sex. She said, they won't last. A sucker for poeticoidal allusion, the mister had always liked when Bunny offered him the sweet, cold plums of William Carlos Williams' poems. He said, but they're so beautiful where they are. Ah, we were all beautiful once, said Bunny. Chapter 40. The three did not check out the next morning. Apparently, they left in a hurry during the night, taking only the clothes on their backs and their devices in their rental car and leftover complimentary pillow mints. There was no evidence in the local or state news that the agents had submitted a report, that an investigation and another report had resulted, that another and yet another violent event had occurred in Cord and had led to a dead end that in April would be called a conclusive report of no foul play in the matters of Dukian and Alice and Acker. Bunny threw away the agent's hair products, toothbrushes, clothes, their deodorants and colognes, their microwave pizza leavings and chip bags and candy bar wrappings and smashed beer cans. At Stanley's, Acker Stanley's, she bartered with Minister for the no-iron shirts and slacks, the luggage pieces, all the items left behind. One of the agents left a watch of some value. One of them left a selfie stick, one a mega flashlight named Umwelt Alpha Leaked. Minister purchased the selfie stick. He liked the idea of shooting Aurelia and him at some future time. Bunny brought Alice one of the MAGA hats the young agents had left behind. Bunny commented that it was not a hat made in America and not in fact a tribute to how greatly things could be manufactured now or ever again. And she said, if you don't want it, say so. Junior Stanley has dibs on it. When she gave Alice the flashlight as an added gift, she explained that she had seen it on TV. They used these in the military. The thing can practically light the dark side of the moon. Goes on your belt, said the mister. Would you like your belt back, Alice? Bunny then answered her own question, not yet. And she touched Alice's waist, spreading her fingers there. Alice, Alice, no belt? Not yet. Bunny did not say what she was thinking, that a belt or two are handy things if you haven't a gun to do yourself in. And for a murder, a couple belts were the perfect suicide-seeming weapon. And for a wannabe slender waist, a belt served as a cinch to meatify yourself, like the butcher string pulled tightly round a roast. No longer recognizing her own will, apart from the will of her keepers, Alice asked Bunny what day it was, what month, year. You always ask that, said Bunny. Have you met my parents? Have they visited you here? You can ask them anything you want. Holding the MAGA hat, clearly deciding to keep it, Alice asked Bunny an emotional question that reached far beyond self-concern. Alice was now in the deepest part of the dizzying Stockholm Syndrome labyrinth. Is Acker, will she be all right? She's Acker, dear child. If she appears in your story, she's there maybe because she just couldn't stay dead. Maybe because she always was in your story and couldn't stay hid. Thank you. So that's chapter 39 and 40.
Like, there's much applause going on all over. It gives such a sense of the book, even though we're pretty deep in Mac.
It's a late chapter. They're late chapters. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
That line, we were all beautiful once, said Bunny. Such a beautiful way to end that chapter.
It's those lines are from William Carlos Williams. They're from his famous poem, The Act. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you read about Acker too, because I think that, obviously such an important figure in this book. And I have a few questions for you, and we're going to welcome questions from the audience. And first of all, I want to congratulate you, Mac, and
thank you, Peter.
This is a visceral contribution, literarily, to a very public conversation in an incredibly singular way. And I applaud you and Peg for bringing this book out into the world, and I'm honored to be a part of the launch tonight. So I'm here in Vermont, and you're in North Carolina, and we're talking to San Francisco. We got a broad swath of the country.
This is, and by the way, hello everyone.
Yes. So it's an unorthodox book. I'm going to start with an unorthodox question, which I think is fair. I went back just in thinking about tonight to looking at a recent book of yours, 57 Octaves Below Middle C, which I adore, these poems and these prose pieces and these stories. And there's a line from one of the pieces in here that struck me for years. And I was just, as going back and thinking about your work, it struck me anew, and I wanted to ask you a question about it.
Sure.
Point of departure. So the line, the poem is called Batter, and it's just one of the great baseball poems there is, which, like any poem about anything, it's far more than the subject matter. But this is a tiny brief excerpt from the poem. He touches bill, bat, touches cup, bat, touches ass, bat, smells, touches bat, in that order only. The balance is the matter, not the heft, not the weight. The balance is the matter, not the heft, not the weight. It's a line that I pulled out of this poem years ago and put it on my wall. It's the balance. And this relates to what I think is the tightrope that you walk in this novel, and in between a incredibly heinous tragedy, although tragedy that is man-made is sometimes, I think, we overblow that word, but you balance that in, and I hope we'll talk about the inciting incident of this book and the reason that you wrote it. What happened in North Carolina that made you sit down and think about this for years and then write it for over a 5-year period. But the balance between this heinousness versus the comedy versus the love that you have for the place you write about, it just seemed like on every page you're balancing, and that struck me and brought me back to that poem. And I was just wondering if you could maybe set things up under that rubric, if that's
well. First, the batter is it's one of those pieces that you sometimes read it and you think, well, I don't know who that is, but I'm intrigued. This, as the writer of it. And sometimes you read it and you say, oh, that must be the writer at the plate, taking his swing and trying to say, what am I really doing standing here with this bat in my hand? And the matter of that weight, and of the weight that one feels and that one has to feel, you can find the other part of, is, it seems to me, always part of the creative act. I write the novel because I love the space and the depth that the novel has for paradox, so that the darkest, most horrific things can be seen to occur in the envelope of wonder, and that the most wondrous things can be seen to exist in the envelope of horror, and that those two create both a competing and a generative energy, sentence by sentence, for discovering where the work wants to go. And it is very much a book for me that also rings true of the paradox of blues music, which I love very much. And the title references a blues song, One Kind Favor, and what is more, references a blues song that has a really truly horrific resonance in the South, because it is One Kind Favor, I'll ask of you, please see that my grave is kept clean. And one of the things that people forget about the horror of lynching in the South is that that was not enough for the people who committed the lynchings, that they also felt obliged to deface the tombs of the lynched person, if they could in fact find it, if there was any marker at all. And so for me, in writing a novel, I can say to myself, in some vague tuning fork way, oh, this feels right because there are two opposing energies that paradoxically should not exist together and that must exist together. And I do truly believe that the South is a place where there is a powerful and enduring love, and that the powerful and overwhelming force of hate is competing with it in towns that I hope look something like Cord, that I hope Cord looks something like.
This brings me to my kind of related thoughts, and that is that you call this book like a Trump carnivalesque, Trump-esque, carnivalesque escapade.
Yeah.
And it's very much set. Talk about Obama. The lynching that happens to begin the book really happens on November 8th, 2016. Mm-hmm. And as you've said in some of the materials, you said that it it's roughly based on a real event that happened earlier in your state. Again, this sort of current, like we're in a current moment. And I haven't read a book in recent memory, if ever, that addresses the current moment in attempts to address it in such a deep and engaging way, and on more levels than we could possibly get into tonight. But I wonder what was it like to sort of be in that present space, given your method, given your need to have balance and to have comedy and to have love for your characters. How did that work in the present moment? What was it like to write when you had the news happening to you, not just what happened in 2014 in North Carolina, but over the past, well, where do we start, right?
Yeah, I think that this is true of all of us who write, which is that we find in the sort of solitary act of making a sentence and another sentence that we are almost word by word joining humanity in a way we could not have except word by word. And so when I read about this event that occurred in August of 2014, I think I felt what all of us feel when we hear about a person being erased, that we cannot really talk about them as being present is a powerful tragedy. We can only talk about them as being absent. And of course, we feel this powerfully in our current political moment in which we have really, really brave people saying the names, saying George Floyd, saying Breonna Taylor, and saying the names to remind us that the names are what we have. We don't have them. They were taken from us. And so as a writer, I feel this sort of sense of my nation that I love, that we are dealing with all of these absences, and we cry out, we name as a way of responding and as a way of beginning to turn it all inside out, to change systematically what exists that makes this happen. And for me, the fact that it is this in this carnivalesque mode is kind of dictated by the town itself and by the town's rituals and ceremonies. It has its own beast festival. It has its own Soldier's Joy festival. It has a consignment bar that happens to be a consignment bar instead of merely a consignment or a bar. And it is a racially divided small community that actually is small enough to see each other every day, though the definition of territory is clearly marked in the town itself. And it has a place where people can come who are otherwise apart. And that is this place called Stanley's Acres, Stanley's. So I hope that comes close to addressing what you're talking about.
It's such a challenging, I mean, what you attempt here is so challenging. And I guess, and you led into my next question, which has to do with community, which has to do with the fact that that's how you tackle, this present moment in chord. Right. And it was reminiscent to me of writers who zero in on a community in order to get there. And I wondered just kind of where chord came from, and even the first line of the book, naming matters here in chord. which was once called Cord with a C-H-O-R-D, and before that Curd, and there's other playful moments about the name, and of course there's a nickname and etc. So wonder just where did Cord come from, etc.
Well, it's sort of a, when you start doing your homework, which means in part getting a better sense of the geography that is part of the atmosphere, going to be part of the atmosphere of the work. When you start to then imagine a town piece by piece, imagine a consignment bar in the town before imagining the town at all, imagining an event that might characterize the town, and only having those two things, and then starting to ask, as in any town, what are the processes of learning? How do people in a small town, for instance, have significant teachers that generations marked with their love of poetry? And how did that learning find itself at war with learning misogyny and learning racism? And then you have that piece of it. And as with any small town, almost universally, anyone who is not of the town is outsider, and there is this constant tension of how do we know who we are when an outsider like Acker comes to us and actually makes herself very strangely one of our own.
That's what makes her so important. I mean, she is that sort of outside figure in more ways than even that suggests, right? I don't want to give stuff away, but she provides. It's like people start to talk to her, and she somehow knows things. And
wow.
I found her just such an interesting character, and obviously her connection to Lincoln is, pivotal. And Lincoln being the person who was lynched. Who is a presence in quotes, and a presence in this novel. And there's so many questions I want to ask you. And let me just Jadia, Lincoln's mother. How do you handle her? I felt like there was such love for her. It came across on the page. This is the mother of somebody who is, a victim of this heinous, uninvestigated or ultimately uninvestigated crime, murder. I as I was reading it, I thought, wow, Max he's so in tune with this character in a way that it felt very loving to me.
Well, she is, our perception of her in the book, I think, is shaped by this first person plural narrator, this particular form of tribal omniscience that people like Washington Irving understood so well, in which a community actually thinks not only that it knows everybody and everything about everybody in its community, but everything about everybody in the past and everything about everybody in the future, and will speak to that in a way that is illogical, but that is part of the sense of a community that is small enough and has not significantly changed over time, that it can presume to know someone like Jediah, and we are going to understand, I think, from beginning to end, that one of the things that is compelling about her to us is that we can only very incompletely know her and understand her. And for me, as a writer connected to her, the novelist connected to her, to me, there is a great heartbreak in me constantly feeling, I don't know you, Jediah. I can only know you through the way this town thinks it knows you. Then, when you are alone in the swamp, and you are truly undergoing a process of transformation, the transformation itself is how I can come to know you. But any novelist understands that one of the things about the scale of the work is that it constantly reminds you how little you know about every primary, secondary, tertiary character. Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of something Wright Morris, a favorite writer of mine, a Nebraskan writer who all knew. I mean, what you capture here is the undercurrent. And I live in a small Vermont town that everybody thinks is idyllic, and what like danger in Vermont, self-congratulatory Vermont. You look back at the history of race relations here and across the river in New Hampshire. So, but I won't get into that. But there's a line where she says, where the voice says of her, she felt sadness for the loss of herself. She was not sure she felt aloneness meaner than she had known since Lincoln's death 10 months ago. How could there be aloneness anything like that? And the reason I bring up Wright Morris is because in this book, more than any recent book I've read, you use questions. It's not, you're not answering. And what Morris said is the questions drive the fiction. And he would litter his novels with rhetorical questions. And I think readers were like, what the hell? But it's because he acknowledged that it was about the question and I feel like that's what your narrator, your omniscient narrator who knows a great deal, I think you manage this this balancing act between acknowledging what you can't have access to, even though chord and your people know chord backwards and forwards and backwards. So I guess.
Well, she is. I will say this, that one of the things I think time has taught me as a storyteller is that one way to understand a character and meet the character on his own terms is to examine their processes of self-talk. So the ways in which we actually talk to ourselves are some of our most potent secrets as human beings. And the people we talk to inside ourselves are the people that often no one around us can know how that conversation with them matters. We will sometimes speak to someone inside us who is still living, someone who is gone, someone who is gone and dead, but we have them there, and we're in this self-dialogue with them. And for me, understanding that she is always talking to her son, who is gone, but is certainly within her, is another way to look at another angle of the presence of this absent person in her, and the presence of what is absent is the essence of the ghost story, and to some degree one could say that all of this novel is simply an extended ghost story.
I like the connection between the idea of self-talk and being haunted and ghost stories, and I feel like that. And there's so many layers to this and so many ways you could tackle this, but I was especially moved by those sections. And I think when you have these characters who are alone and you are able to have some access to them, that's when I feel like it really dove deep in so many ways. I have one other, and we're probably I saw a raised hand, but I want to slide in one more question.
Oh, sure, yeah, please.
You once gave a talk at Warren Wilson years ago about happiness and about pleasure. Pleasure, and you over the years, this has been a theme of yours when you talk about Sarah Orne Jewett, who I mean, who talks about, thank you for bringing my attention, and a happy story of hers. But there's a line in the book that you kind of go there, and again, a very moving moment for me. They're talking about Lincoln, Jacob and Woolman they're at the bar, I believe, and Jacob says, Woolman says he knows what Lincoln would have wanted to be,
Mhm.
And Jacob says, well, what, he says a planetary geologist. And then woman thought, again, one of these moments, they're actually having a conversation, but this is now an eternal moment of the character. Woman thought he was going to be happy, really. He was going to leave Cord happy, grow his happiness, etc., because he was going to have this job as a planetary geologist. So it struck me as being, you're bringing up this theme again, and in the most difficult of contexts, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine, well, difficult to imagine that.
I think probably in everything I've written, one of the ways I'm redundant is that I um, I look at people if I'm in the long gaze of the storyteller, and I do find myself asking, in what do you take pleasure? And in what ways do you make pleasure around you? And so that often becomes important to secondary or tertiary dramas in the work, especially in a novel in which there's room for a lot of secondary and tertiary dramas. So for instance, um, the matter of Acker and Woolman and Lincoln's preoccupation with Oppie, the Mars rover, um, is in this book because of that moment in which, in the dialogue with the characters, I found myself asking, in what ways do you take pleasure? In what ways do you make pleasure? And in this threesome, specifically, in what ways do you? And Oppie was part of that for them. And then, however, a few pages are given to Oppie. Oppie is a strange tertiary character in the work.
And there's a question from Sherry Shields, which I want to
Hi,
tackle
Sherry.
because it's sort of related to where you're going here, where you're bringing Oppie. I mean, you're willing to try so many different things within the structure that you create, which is such a plastic structure that allows you to take that kind of risk. And Sherry asks, "Hi, I'm a former New Mexico State student of yours here. I'm hitting age 50 and I'm now just pushing myself to take risks, aren't we all? Take risks as a writer to write truthfully. What risks have you taken with your writing that have paid off?"
Well, first, hi, Sherry. How lucky it is that across all this time, I can actually be in conversation with you again. And it gives me the opportunity to ask you to forgive me for whatever appalling things I said as a teacher who was, after all, a learner teacher. But for me, part of the risk is not flinching from what the work itself is producing in that mysterious way that we think of as autopoiesis, the way in which a work makes itself, especially once it goes past a certain critical mass of development. And always there's this question, to what degree will you flinch and not present this? So this question you and I were just having about Jediah, this is a Black woman, and this is a work that is examining not just her outer condition, but her inner life. Any moment like that is a moment in which a writer can say, not me, not now, maybe not ever. And that is a missed opportunity to hear Jediah. It's a missed opportunity to hear what she wishes to teach me. And what she teaches me in this book matters to what I will write next, and what Lincoln teaches me, and what these characters that are the most difficult and complex and enigmatic have to teach me. But the other thing is that the risk is how long you spend. 5 years I worked on this book, and that is 5 years of your life. If you see 70 in the headlights like I do, and it has taken you about 5 years to write each book that you have written, you start to do some math and say to yourself, how many more books, I wonder. And so this characters and their outer and inner lives are usually the great risk that the book itself presents. And I'm just so glad to hear from you, Sherry. And Sherry, good luck in everything you're doing.
I just started at high school level and everything you taught me was amazing and I use it now, she said.
That's great.
I want to ask you about language. Your language is so singular and it drives the rhythms I just want to talk to you about music in the language. And just as an example, just taking notes, and I wasn't even taking notes to prepare for this. I was taking notes while I was reading it in my notebook just so I have this. The feet in the river places. The feet in the river places. It conjures so, it's so, your language is so, in this book in particular, so local, and again, not a question, more an observation, but Jacob could feel that she was behind the scrim of the deeper darkness, but there is 1,000 examples of this. And I'm just wondering how you hear these voices and how the rhythms come to you. And do you have to revise to get feet in the river places, things like that?
Lots of revision and extensive revision. This is always true for me. Always takes me about 3.5 to 4 years to arrive at the full draft, and then multiple transformative drafts thereafter. But it also comes from something that is important to more than one of the books that I've written, which is orality. And I was very fortunate that I grew up steeped in oral storytelling on both my mother's and my father's side. And so I had the opportunity to train my ear to oral storytelling and to pay attention to the nuances of, let's say, the forms of oral storytelling that are unique to the ghost story. And let's say maybe particularly the ghost story in the tradition of Appalachia and of the Piedmont. And I am very fortunate that means that I can say as I write, instead of feeling that the first obligation of making the draft is to sing. And since I really firmly believe that the power of orality is that it is drawing you under tonally as much as it is substantively, and you find that other things are gathering almost by accident that have to do with plot, theme, character, but that the sonic qualities of that singing narrative you can grant in some works. Here's a work in which I can grant it its full iteration.
The community voice has that rhythm, so it's like it isn't just a singular narrator. It's sort of the community or some voice hovering above the community. Also, the way your characters talk, they also are aware of the sonic qualities. Sarah Stone has a question.
Hi, Sarah.
She says, it's wonderful to hear this conversation. I'm very much looking forward to the novel. Mac, can you talk about some of the reading that nurtured you during the years you worked on this book? A question that I have as well.
Yeah, well, this carnivalesque mode that I talked about is something that I find myself drawn to beyond my conscious understanding. But then I do try to understand how someone like Angela Carter takes that carnivalesque mode and fully realizes it. Somebody like Julio Cortázar, in both Cortázar's great novel, Hopscotch, in those amazing short stories in I Love Glenda so much, there is a sense of play, and studying his work and studying the work of writers like Erta Müller, whose work is so unrelentingly dark that you are in a kind of carnival of horror in every moment of it. I do read their work and study it. One can call both the short novels and the big novels of Toni Morrison carnivalesque, since they as often ask us to look at what is happening right in front of us, to our left, to our right, behind us. We are looking around as much as we are ever sort of saying, what direction is this going? And so I study those works, and when there is a new writer that I have the opportunity to study even closer, like Cortázar, I try to make the most of it. By the way, Cortázar's amazing book of essays about writing, in it, he uses this term carnivalesque, and he has another term he uses that appeals greatly to me. He says he likes to write in the ludic mode. And by that he means the mode of high ludicrousness, and in which you can involve the reader in things that move beyond being irreal, and then beyond being abnormal, and beyond being absurd, to ludicrous and silly and nonsensical. And and so then you are writing something like Alice in Wonderland. And once I was aware that the book was of that kind of ludic mode, then there are references to Alice and to that Carolinian, nonsensical, silly, ludicrous mode that has surprising substance.
You in one of your answers in the interview, you talk about the great Czech writer Harabal.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it seems to me to fit into the Cortázar sort of like go for it, and
Oh,
but
truly.
again have real darkness. I mean, there's a suicide every other, right? But Harabal has that sort of ludicrous quality.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. He Cortázar would surely locate him in the ludic mode. Yeah.
And Kathy Acker is also clearly somebody
Yes.
to think about, and somebody who definitely you pay great homage to in this book. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about her. And I also have another question for Marion, the writer, coming up.
Well, because Acker was so incredibly brave as a writer, so incredibly brave, wild and brave, and crazy and brave, and obscene and brave. She is somebody who I hold as a model. And when Acker appeared in this work, I was utterly surprised that this writer that I admire was in fact a character in the work. Had to, in the process of composing, come to terms with why this would be true. I believe when I read the book now that Acker was in the early drafts there to test my conscience as the writer. In my dialogue with her as a character, I pictured her saying, are you holding back? Are you going as wild as you could? Are you allowing this work to be obscene when it wants to be? Are you measuring the horror, or are you spilling it out? And it is good to have a character in the work who can act as your conscience as the writer, and can function, I hope this is true, as a believable and memorable character.
Quite a person to have over your shoulder, right?
Yeah,
and not
truly.
just over your shoulder, but inside
Yeah.
in so many ways. And it's quite a tribute.
Truly, I when I used to teach her book Blood and Guts in high school, the reaction was almost always, "What?" And when I would teach someone like Russell Edson, the reaction would be, "What?" And there are writers that you say to yourself, "Oh, that writer is mine. I love that writer." I know there are other readers who do, but we we have a special love for this writer and Acker. It's
It's
true.
really nice what you say about like that she was in there kind of telling you, are you going far enough?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
quite, and that helps us, I think, really understand sort of where you're coming from a lot in this book. Marion, the writer, says you reference specific political figures and agencies in the story. Did you find the timeline of contemporary political events at all constraining in your creative process? Or was it a helpful framework in which to place your characters and their hopes and fears?
You know, this is a great question for me because uh, I I still, well, there's so much I still have to learn as a writer and as a novelist. But one of the things that constantly occurs for me is that the milieu wants its way into the work. It doesn't want to be excluded. It doesn't want to be even accidentally understated. That it wants to be part of the dynamic force of the story, and that there is always this question about how much room there is within the specific work that I'm making for the milieu to have its presence, its energy in the work. And it is true that in each process of revision, a lot of that goes in, a lot of it comes out, a lot of it is replaced by other stuff. And I just want to say this about great editors. A great editor like Peg Alford Purcell is somebody you can talk to about this. You can say, could we talk about the presence of the Pope in this work? And can we talk about this use of the word Reich in representing Trump and the Trump era? And it is really good to have somebody who isn't going to, in the abstract, talk with you about that, but from inside the work.
From the context.
And I've been very lucky in my life in terms of working with many editors who would allow me to ask those questions from inside the work and help me in my revision process of saying how much of that goes in, how much doesn't, how specifically, at what stages is it more important in the novel than other stages?
And just for the record, the Pope makes it in, and as does Reich. From my memory, the Pope is complicated, but the Pope is there, or a Pope. Someone named the Pope. I think we're running a little low on time, but I have one last question, if that's okay.
Oh,
sure.
Sure.
It has to do with North Carolina. And your reverence for a state you lived in for many, many years, which has a deeper tradition than the headline we're talking about that animated the book. It's a complicated thing, and I'm just wondering, you clearly love this place, you love the landscape, and you love the people, and I just wonder how just the state of North Carolina and its complicated history of being a fairly liberal Southern state, not just Harvey Gantt, but long before Harvey Gantt, back in the day, Warren Wilson College founded. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on North Carolina.
It is. It's a state that was always considered one of the quote unquote progressive Southern states. And those of us who didn't grow up here, I grew up in the Midwest in Southern Illinois, would hear of it that way. Those of us who paid attention to politics would hear of it and see that it had that quality, that it could aspire to building on that quality. And one of the things that still I know for a fact shocks people here in this state is how fast the reversion to hate and to the hate impulse happened. Not just that it sort of slowly happened, because a slow erosion of tolerance, in my opinion, really one can trace to the first day of the Reagan administration and in my era. But the speed of that reversion is something that you can see people, loving good people, still trying to reckon with in their own hearts, and hold themselves answerable to, and look around them and say, how now do we undo that that way that we've become? Because North Carolina has become the weather vane for far right politics, and our legislature is probably the farthest right of any legislature in the United States today.
And yet, Moral Mondays, right? So
Yeah.
much coming out of North Carolina, guiding us, in a rationality, not just from the left. There's a question from Scotland real quick, and then there's 2 more questions. Can we squeeze them in? We'll take 1 more minute.
I'll be brief. I've been too long in answering. Yeah.
Hello from Scotland. It's 3 a.m. I should be asleep. It's a question. This is a wonderful conversation. The opposite of shallow, says this is the writer Donald McLaughlin, close friend of mine. Hi, Donald. And he's just wondering if this conversation is going to be online. So maybe the Green Apple could step in.
I think Green Apple said in its messages that this would be. I think so. Yeah.
Great. So Donald, we'll get it to you. Thank you for listening.
Hi, Donald. Thank you for listening in the wee hours.
Can I ask one more question about poetry, Casey? Do we have time? So
yeah.
Todd McKinney asks, since William Carlos Williams comes up, how does poetry impact your prose? Which, is a long.
Well, I really do believe that while this may seem counterintuitive, people like me who have worked in the long form, the novel, I have always given my primary energies to writing the novel. I've always been, despite myself, writing short fiction and prose poetry and short stories in a kind of fabular mode. But while it may seem counterintuitive, for anyone who feels the novel as this opportunity for this singing that we were talking about, it's absolutely imperative to learn from the poets. And I just want to say that that is a long process for me. I have been committed to it all my life, and I haven't even begun to scratch how rich and how remarkable it is, especially in the American tradition, and excitedly in this moment, in a moment in which we have so many great American poets.
So important for fiction writers to hear. Jennifer Rosner says, wonderful reading and amazing conversation. I think Casey's given us the hook. So
thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, thank you guys both. To answer Donald's question, we do put many of our readings on our YouTube channel, so this one should be up there in a couple days. And also, as a reminder to everyone watching, we do have copies of One Kind Favor for sale at greenapplebooks.com. And yeah, thank you for all of your, everyone who attended, for all of your questions in this great conversation. And Peter and Kevin, thank you again for joining us tonight. So yeah.
Thank you all my friends. Thank you for being here. Thank you again, Peter.
Such a great to see you, Mac, and I hope in person soon enough.
Oh, I hope so too. Thanks. Please take care.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everybody.